Story 1, Room 111, My Haunting Experience. My name is Justin, and this is the story of the day when I was stuck on a lonely road in the middle of the night. My parents lived in New York City. I had visited them, but I had to head back late at night due to an urgent meeting. It was a dark and stormy night when I left for my house. As I was passing through a lonely road, my car suddenly broke down in the middle of the road. Unfortunately, it was raining cats and dogs that day. I exited the car to find someone to help me, but no one was on the silent road. I locked my car and I started walking on the deadly silent road. After walking for almost 5 miles, I finally found a hotel. It was a small hotel located on a corner of the road and surrounded by some tall trees. The atmosphere in the lobby was really eerie. The air felt dusty and disturbing, but I ignored my feelings because I had no other option. The receptionist was an older woman. She seemed hesitant. After some convincing, she finally gave me a rusty key and muttered, "Room 111. There was a single light in the corridor, and room 111 was right there, at the end of the corridor. I entered the room, and it was in bad condition. The furniture was covered with layers of dust, and cobwebs clung to the walls. The room was so dusty and uninviting, but I had no other choice, so I pushed my uneasiness aside. The furniture seemed ancient, and the bed was covered with old blankets. A dim light hung from the ceiling, and some moonlight coming from the window lit the room a little bit. After changing out of my wet clothes and making sure my luggage was secure, I finally settled down on the grimy bed. But all the while, the sensation of being watched wouldn't leave me. It was so intense that I couldn't shake it off, but I was so tired that I decided to sleep. I turned off the lights and tried to sleep. Just as I was about to fall asleep, I heard some whispers. The voice was really low, but they were enough to send shivers down my spine. After struggling for some time, I eventually fell asleep. However, a strange nightmare troubled my dream. In my dream, I was wandering in the hotel halls. All the corridors were dark, and without anything light, I was walking around as though I was lost. I still remember the unsettling voices that I heard in that nightmare. The moans and the screams coming from behind closed doors were haunting me, and I was running away to escape the hotel. When I awoke, it was still the middle of the night. The light bulb, which I had turned off before going to sleep, was surprisingly on. That was the time I started panicking. I rushed toward the room door and tried to open it, but it seemed jammed. I put all my strength into it, but nothing helped. I reached for the phone and called reception, but I was waiting for someone to answer. I felt so uncomfortable in that room. I could not understand what it was, but the discomfort was overwhelming. I reached the door and tried to open it again, but it remained firmly shut. The door was sealed tight. But I didn't give up and started banging on the door and calling for help. I kept shouting for help because I was so desperate to get out of that room. The uneasy feeling was growing with each passing moment. Suddenly, I heard footsteps approaching the room. I started shouting more loudly, and finally, someone opened the door. It was the same elderly receptionist who had given me the room key. I stepped out of the room as soon as she opened the door. The woman looked into my eyes and said, "Everyone leave room 111. Her voice was similar to what I heard in my nightmare. The expression on her face left me speechless, and without wasting any moment, I grabbed my luggage and left the hotel in the middle of the night. I never looked back to that hotel, It was the most scary experience of my life. After that night, I have never traveled alone at night because memories of that scary night still haunt me. It's so hard to forget about that night. I still remember those whispers, even after many years have passed. There was something strange in room 111, and nobody knew that still. Story 2. Forbidden Room. My name is Alex, and this is the story of the day I'll never forget. One weekend, my parents and Mark's parents were both away, so we decided to have a night over at his place. I had never visited his house before, but I had heard a lot about it. Mark's house was very famous because it was an old Victorian mansion-type house made with ancient stones, and it looked amazing. Due to excitement, I also agreed, and after having dinner, we went to his house to sleep. Mark showed me around. He gave me a house tour and showed me every corner, every room. A room caught my attention. It was a room near his parents' master room, and the door of the room was closed. Mark said, "Never even look at that room. Seriously, don't." There was something in his voice that made me realize that he was not joking, and it was a serious matter. While talking about something, I tried to ask Mark about that mysterious room, but he didn't tell me anything. He mentioned that his parents had strictly ordered him to never step into that room. He said that I should forget about it and never even look at that room, or try to tell anyone about that. At first, his words sent a shiver down my spine, but my curiosity would not let the matter rest. However, the night passed away in a blink of an eye. We stayed up the whole night, watching movies and TV shows, ate a lot of food, and talked about everything. Around 2 a.m., Mark and I decided it was time to sleep, and we went to his room because we were sleeping together. I fell asleep as soon as I hit the bed, but in the middle of the night, I woke up because I was feeling incredibly thirsty. I asked Mark to get me some water, but he said to grab it from downstairs because he was too sleepy to help me. I grabbed a bottle of water and returned to Mark's room. As I passed the forbidden room, the room caught my attention again. I looked at the room, and my curiosity kicked in. I forgot Mark's warning as I stepped towards that room to check it. I couldn't resist the urge to find out what lay inside. I sneaked towards that room, being careful not to make any noise. The handle was too old to even touch, and it creaked lightly as I gently tuned it. There was nothing but darkness in the room. At first, I thought it might be Mark's parents' secret library that contained thousands of books, but the room was so dark that I couldn't figure out what was really in there. I eventually found a small button near the door, and as I turned it on, a small dim bubble lit up the room. The room was nothing like what I imagined. It was a dusty room with some old furniture and nasty things. It seemed like a storeroom. I was about to turn around and leave when I saw a little door in the corner of the room. Some light was coming out from the gaps of the door, suggesting that someone was inside. My curiosity got the best of me, and I stepped toward the room and tried to see through the gaps, but the light was so bright that I could not see on the other side. I tried to open the door with the handle, but it didn't work. As I was about to open the door forcefully, I heard my name being called. The voice was barely audible, but it filled the room. It sounded like someone was calling me from the outside of the room, and my first thought was that it had to be Mark. So I ditched the plan of sneaking into that small room and rushed outside of the room. However, as I stepped through the doorway, the door behind me slammed shut with a tug, as if someone had forcefully pushed it. Ignoring the strange situation, I looked around to find Mark, but there was nobody. I rushed towards Mark's room and found him sleeping peacefully on the bed. I again went downstairs to check who called my name, but no one was in the house. It was just me and Mark in the whole house alone, but I clearly heard someone calling my name. I still remember it. I rushed back to Mark's room and tried to sleep, but I could not sleep the whole night due to some unknown fear. There was something strange in that house, in that room, precisely. The next morning, I didn't wait momentarily and left his house. After that day, I never returned to Mark's house, and I also didn't share this incident with anyone. All I know is there was something at Mark's place, something really strange. Story 3. The day we went on a road trip. I'm Tom, and I'll tell you about the scariest night of my life. It happened on a road trip with my friends Jordan and Peen. We were driving through the countryside because we loved adventure and exploration, so we decided to go on a road trip. We didn't have a set destination. Our plan was to drive until we got tired and explore the beauty of the countryside. It was the time when we were driving endlessly and when suddenly Jordan stopped the car in the middle of nowhere. He parked the car near an abandoned house. The house seemed like a mess, with shattered windows and a roof that looked like it would collapse at any moment. It was the kind of house that you would only find in a horror movie. Being the crazy teenagers we were, we decided to stay in that house for tonight. We entered the house, and the atmosphere inside was nothing but dusty. It was pitch black, and our flashlights only lightened some areas. I felt a sense of being watched, but I chalked it up to the creepy surroundings. The wooden floor made weird sounds with each step, and some strange sound echoed in the shadows, distant and almost inaudible. We told ourselves it was just the wind, but deep down, we decided to explore the whole house. I headed down a long, dimly lit hallway. The strange voice of air grew louder, and my heart pounded in my chest because the voice was not normal. I entered a room, and inside, I found an old, dusty mirror. When I looked into it, my reflection seemed strange. But as I stared, I saw another body appear behind my reflection for a second. I jolted back in shock and spun around to see who was behind me, but the room was empty. Suddenly, the sense of uneasiness and discomfort grew, and I rushed out of the room to find friends. As I was about to leave the room, the door slammed shut, and I was trapped inside the room. I panicked and tried to open the door, but I didn't move a bit at all. In the room's darkness, I could not see anything clearly because my phone's light was so dim. I felt someone outside the room, and I heard my friend's voice from the other side of the door. "Guys, please help me. The door is stuck." I screamed and asked my friends to help me. Suddenly, the mirror fell on the ground and broke into pieces as those words left my mouth. My friends didn't waste any other moment and started pushing the door with all the force. As I waited for them to help me, I felt the room grow darker and the air became cold. I couldn't help but feel scared. My body started trembling because of fear. After almost 10 minutes of suffering, my friends finally forced the door and escaped. We ran out of the house and never looked back. That night, the memory of that strange abandoned house still haunts me sometimes. I could not help but wonder what was there in that house. Somehow, he could not shake that something evil was present in that strange house. Story 4. How fun turned into a terror experience. I'm Shay, and today I'm going to share my scariest real-life experience from my college life. During my college years, I was the kind of person who never believed in ghosts or anything supernatural. I thought it was just a made-up story people share just for fun, and I always considered it as a big joke. Me and my friends used to make fun of these things and never paid real attention. However, one of our friends, Christiana, was really scared of these things and believed they were real. We often laughed at her for being afraid of something that didn't exist. Our disbelief in the supernatural was so strong that we often dared each other to visit places that were supposed to be haunted. We thought it was a fun and good way to prove that there was nothing to be afraid of in the dark. However, Christiana never believed us. One Friday night, my friends found an Ouija board on the road outside our campus. Being typical bored university students, we decided to test the board. All my buddies, Jake, Christiana, and Mikal, gathered in my dorm room to give it a try. First, we cleaned the Ouija board to remove the dust from the board and read the written words clearer. It seemed like an old Ouija board, untouched for a long time. Jake suggested that we should create an atmosphere, so we lit some candles, turned off the lights, and placed the Ouija board on the study table. All of us were excited because we thought we were about to have a fun experience, but little did we know that this experience would be everything but fun. Mikkel could not stop laughing the whole time. That situation was nothing but fun and entertainment for us. After reading the rules, we put our fingers on the planchette. According to the description on the board, we were supposed to rest our fingers on the planchette, and we did it. "Come on, ghosts. Come out of your hiding spot," Jake said jokingly in a playful tone, and all of us laughed at his joke. All of us were just having fun, laughing at silly jokes and making fun of Christiana because of her fear. "Is anyone there?" Mikal asked the most common question that came to mind, and all of us laughed, but slowly and unexpectedly, it glided across to yes. "Mikal, don't play with us. It is not funny," Christiana screamed at Michael. She thought that he was playing a prank on her, but Mikal said that he had done nothing and it happened naturally. "Is there something wrong with this thing?" Jake said aloud, nervously, breaking the tension in the room. And the planchette moved across to no, and we all busted into laughter, and this time Christina also laughed with us. The tension in the air disappeared, but just for a moment, the board started moving again. We stared at the board and froze in fear. The movement of planchette spelled out the name Aman. We looked at each other, confused because we didn't know anyone named Aman. Everyone went silent, unable to understand the situation, and chills ran down my spine due to unknown fear. "Hey, Aman, buddy. How can I help you?" Mikal joked again. He was still not scared, and his tone was normal, like usual. This time, Planchette moved to revenge and shocked all of us. "Okay, this is not a joke anymore. Who is doing this?" Jake asked nervously. He was as scared as me. Both of us knew something was wrong with this board. It was so clear that this was an ordinary game or prank. No one said a word. This time, the planchette didn't move either, as if waiting for something. The silence in the room grew, and no one said a word or moved from their place. The only thing we could hear was Christina's sobs. Her sacred body was shivering a little, and all of us were so scared at that moment. We just sat down there and stared at the board, unable to figure out what to do. Suddenly, the candles flickered, and the shadows on the walls moved strangely. Christina screamed because of the sudden change in lights, which scared us all more than earlier. Jake asked Amun how we could make amends because it was the only way to get out of this situation. And finally, the planchette moved again. This time, it spelled blood. That's when we all understood the situation, and panic hit us. Christiana swiftly tried to remove her finger from the planchette, but it didn't move a bit. We all tried to move our fingers, but it was like it was glued to the board. It didn't move an inch. Christiana's sobs converted into cry screams again, and we were all at a loss for what to do next. My body started trembling with fear. The mere thought of getting killed by some evil spirit was enough to make me cry. But Mikkel somehow managed to maintain his composure, and he assured us that everything would be fine. But we had to stop crying because the sound of cries and sobs disturbed the ghost. Suddenly, all the candles went out one by one, and the darkness in the room grew deeper. Suddenly, I heard someone whispering. It was small muttering at first, but then grew louder and more louder. But we tried our best not to scream or make any voice. "We are sorry, we didn't mean it," Mikkel screamed, his voice trembling a little. I could see the fear from his expression. But the entity known as Amun was not satisfied yet. He wanted something really big and unreal. The planchette started moving again and spelled out, "Not enough." Amun's words made zero sense this time, but suddenly, Jack's finger that was fixed on the board started bleeding. In some seconds, his blood covered half of the board. We all just sat there helplessly, but suddenly Christiana started screaming the word, "Goodbye." And that's when I remembered that it was a way to break the connection. We had to say goodbye to break the connection between the board and the real world. We all started reciting the word together, and after some seconds, the room fell silent. The whispering stopped, the candle flickered back to life, and the planchette released our fingers. As Amun's spirit left the room, the candle lightened up again. The room returned to normal, but the encounter was so scary. After that, we never touched that Ouija board again. We learned that night that some things are better left alone, and we also started believing in the supernatural. However, we still sometimes wonder about the malevolent entity Amun. That day, we started to play with the board just for fun, but the fun turned into something really scary. This experience from my college life, I will never forget. Story 5. Alone in the Wild Forest. My name is Tira, and today I'll tell you about the time I made the mistake of hiking in the forest during the night. The day when my adventure soul made me do that dumbest thing ever. In 2016, I loved hiking, and mostly solo hiking was my thing. One day, I decided to hike in an ancient forest, and for the first time, I went hiking in the middle of the night. Going hiking was my first mistake, and doing it at night was my second. It was late at night when I reached the middle of the forest. I was halfway done with my hiking, so I decided to rest. I sat on a stone. The sky was deep black that day, and the wild wind made all the trees float in the air. I was looking deep into the woods when I felt someone staring at me from behind. I looked back immediately because it's important to be attentive while you are in the middle of the forest, but there was nobody there. I couldn't help but feel an unusual sense of being watched, but I dismissed it as nerves. After some time, I continued my hiking, but the feeling of someone watching was still there. Hours passed while hiking, but I couldn't erase the uncomfortable feeling from my heart. It was as if someone were following me the whole time. As I reached the deep forest, I set up my camp in a small, clear area. After setting up a small camp and making a small fire, I sat against it to relax. But suddenly, I heard a voice from the woods. My heart raced, but I scanned the dark woods around me, but nothing was visible. At that moment, I thought it must be some animals, and I got really scared. I went into my camp and hid from the reach of any animal. After some time, I decided to sleep and settled into my sleeping bag and fell asleep quickly. However, right after 5 minutes, my sleep was disturbed by some whispers. The whispers were so clear because the forest was so silent, and all I could hear were those eerie whispers. The tone of the whispers was very Socratic, and that sent a shiver down my spine. But after gathering some courage, I decided to look out. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out of the tent, but there was no one. I scanned the forest beyond my tent for 15 minutes, but no sign of anyone. Fear gnawed at me because the whispering was really clear, and I was pretty sure that I heard it. Suddenly, the forest seemed to be closing in on me. The trees were suffocating me with their oppressive presence, and the sense of being watched grew so strong. Without wasting one more moment, I gathered all my courage and ran blindly through the woods with only a dim flashlight. The forest was dark, and because of late night, the air was so cold, but I cared about nothing and just ran. While running away, I heard someone calling my name from behind, but I didn't stop. Stopping there would have made things worse, so I decided to ignore everything and escape that strange forest. It seemed like the forest was bigger than anything else, because it took me an eternity to escape the forest. Finally, after some time, I reached the clear area with no gigantic trees and a suffocating environment. I looked back at the forest, but it seemed silent and clearly still, as though nothing had ever happened there. That terrifying experience really shook my core, and from that day, I quit hiking at night. I still can't figure out what those whispers were and who called for my name in the woods that day. However, I still remember that feeling of watching continuously, and those whispers still echo in my mind sometimes. That was the most terrifying experience of my life.
The end. Thanks for watching. Don't leave before leaving a like to this video. Also hit the subscribe button to support my work. And as always, have a horrific nightmare, my dear.